Christian Karl Gerhardsreiter was born in 1961 in a small German town, nothing special, nothing remarkable, just an ordinary kid who would one day decide that being himself was far too boring. Instead of living a normal life, Christian thought, why not just invent new ones? So in 1978 he moved to the United States and immediately began testing out identities like they were outfits at a thrift store. First, he tried Christopher Chichester, which honestly sounds less like a real person and more like a cartoon character who would get smacked with a frying pan, but somehow people bought it. He walked around rich California neighborhoods in preppy clothes, claiming he was descended from British royalty, and apparently in the 1980s, if you wore a blazer and spoke with a fake accent, you could convince anyone of anything. But Christian wasn't satisfied. He cycled through names like Christopher Crowe and Chip Smith before finally landing on his magnum opus, Clark Rockefeller. Yes, that Rockefeller, as in the American dynasty with billions of dollars and political influence. This man, who had no money, no proof, no connections, just announced, "Hi, I'm Rockefeller," and somehow got into cocktail parties with actual millionaires. Imagine standing in a room with real billionaires when the fanciest thing you own is a blazer from Goodwill and nobody questions it. He married a successful woman, lived in luxury apartments, strolled through Central Park with a dog, introduced himself as Rockefeller, and people just nodded and clapped him on the back. The sheer audacity is almost admirable, but behind the comedy was something darker, because back in 1985, when he was still Christopher Chichester, he lived in San Marino, California, renting a guest house from neighbours John and Linda Sohus. Then one day, John and Linda vanished. Years later, workers digging in that backyard found human remains, later identified as John Sohus. Linda was never found. Who was the prime suspect? Of course, Chichester, who by that point had already disappeared into his next identity. So while he sipped champagne in New York, pretending to be a Rockefeller, there was an unsolved murder tied directly to him on the other side of the country, and he still got away with it for decades. His downfall wasn't the murder, wasn't the lies, wasn't the fake names. No, his empire of lies collapsed in 2008 during a messy divorce, when this supposed elite Rockefeller literally kidnapped his own daughter during a supervised custody visit. He shoved her into a car in broad daylight in front of witnesses and tried to escape, only to get tackled by Boston police officers. Imagine scamming society for decades only to be taken down by a custody battle and a couple of street cops. That incident unraveled everything. Investigators dug into his background and realized Clark Rockefeller didn't exist. Christopher Chichester didn't exist. None of it existed. What did exist was Christian Gerhardsreiter, a German man with a trail of lies and a body buried in a backyard. In 2013, he was convicted of John Sohut's murder and sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. So the man who wanted to be a Rockefeller ended up a rock frauder, proving that no matter how convincing your accent or how good your blazer, reality eventually catches up. And that's the absurd story of Christian Gerhardsreiter. Liar, murderer, kidnapper, wannabe aristocrat, and arguably the most ridiculous conman in true crime history. A man who managed to scam his way into the upper class using nothing but pure audacity and the confidence of someone who clearly never heard the phrase, "Can I see some ID?"